All right, well, Santaco Western Cape chairperson Mandla Hermanus joins me live now for another conversation on this then. Mandla, let's perhaps just get your sentiment and your immediate reaction to what has happened and the tragic incident, and whether you agree whether it is really about roots.
Thank you for having me. This is very sad. We can't, in 2025, be having these kinds of incidents happening in our industry, given all the efforts that we put in place to ensure that where there's conflicts, we encourage associations to sit around the table and find amicable solutions. So we condemn this in the strongest terms, and we would implore all law enforcement agencies to actually work together and ensure that the perpetrators of this violence gets arrested and are brought to justice. And we condemn it. And this kind of thing has no place, not in this day and age, in the minibus taxi industry.
Mandla, is it really about roots?
We don't want to speculate, but we also understand that there were tensions between these two associations, CATA and CODETA, in relation to a route between Somerset West and Mfuleni. But there were engagements between these associations last week with the mobility department. There were supposed to be follow-up meetings on Tuesday. And so we do not understand how, when these associations were talking to each other, how then this would still happen. But what we are going to do on Monday, we will call these associations as Santaco now, because we were not part of the engagements with the mobility department. It was primarily between the two associations and the transportation board. But now we will get involved as Santaco. We will call these associations and try to understand what is it that could have led to loss of lives when a platform had been opened for engagement to try and resolve these things. But we understand that there are tensions, so it's not far-fetched to assume that this killing could be related to that.
How do we fix this, though, Mandla? Because it's becoming tenuous. It's becoming something we know is going to happen time and time again, every year, maybe even every quarter, really. There's going to be a situation like this. Something sparks up, formal route allocations, the overlapping of jurisdictions, informal enforcement mechanisms. Why are we lacking in this, and why are we unable to enforce it?
I think what needs to happen, the government has to be firm when it comes to regulations, and also government has to be firm and correct issues where it has committed some of the errors that eventually lead to these kinds of things.
I'm so sorry to do this to you, Mandla, but I would like to ask, is it really the government's job then to be managing routes? Is it not the taxi associations, including Santaco?
The allocation of routes and operating licenses lies with government, and it is those allocations and those operating licenses that when they overlap, then you have these kinds of issues, because each one claims to have legal rights to operate. So when two different associations have the same rights to operate on one route, it's always a recipe for violence when there's no agreement, there's no formal agreement between those two associations. So it's one of the things that we are advocating for, that where there's already an existing taxi association that has a particular route, you cannot then allocate the same route to another association, because now that is going to result in conflict between those two associations.
So ultimately...
the issue of operating licenses lies squarely with the Department of Transport. Santaco, in terms of regulations, does not get involved in any way whatsoever in terms of even saying we recommend that this is how it should be issued. This is how this route should be structured. Santaco does not get involved. We are only called in when there are these challenges. Now we must now start to speak to these associations and try and find a solution.
So ultimately we're saying here government is at fault for the tensions that we're ultimately seeing and possibly even these deaths, according to what you've made note of there, because of the allocation or the misallocation of these routes. Why do they say to you that you cannot be part of the suggested process in allocating these routes and how it should be done when you guys are the ones who are on the ground, actually know these routes better and know this allocation? What is government's response to you?
This has been a long-standing issue where we are saying there needs to be regulatory powers that Santaco should have so that we are able to intervene. But that would need a review of the legislation to allow for Santaco to have those powers. In the absence of those powers, there's no legal mechanism in which we can be part of the drafting of the routes and the route allocations. So that's what we have been calling for, because this goes even further. Even when you try to discipline a member, if we are doing it as Santaco, that member goes to the department and says, Santaco is issuing me with this fine or is stopping my vehicle from operating. The response we get from government is that we did not issue the operating license as Santaco, and therefore we've got no right to take any action against that member. All we can do is make a recommendation to the department, but even then, for us to participate in those processes, it must be because that particular member has asked for us to be part of that process. Yeah. So there's no legal mechanism for us to intervene. And that's what we've been saying needs to change.
It makes it very interesting, because then I wonder what Santaco's role is ultimately then in the taxi industry, if it's all between government and the taxi associations themselves. Before I continue, Mandla, are you able to share any further details with regards to the 4 people that were killed and the 3 others that were wounded? Do we have any further information by any chance? Do you get any further data?
No, so far we have not received any information. All that we know of the 3 that were rushed to hospital. One, unfortunately, was actually a commuter, so it was not a taxi operator, which is very sad, which is one of the things that we've been calling for, that when we engage in these kinds of things, it's not just us who get affected, it's also the people whom we depend on for our livelihoods. But we will engage with the regional chairpersons of the 2 associations on Monday to get further details as to what has happened and also on the state of those who were taken to hospital.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much for that one, Mandla. Mandla, what's the long-term governance model for South Africa's taxi industry? What does that actually look like? Because we continue to ask about it being an informal society, the worry about it and its tax contributions, the violence that continues to happen in and around it, all of these issues. Surely we need to find a governance model in order to help, but also to ensure that it's more formalized. What do you think that is?
One of the things that we are advocating for is to say we must look at migrating from just taxi associations to registered companies with boards of directors who must be held accountable in terms of the laws of the country. Because at the core of these things, it's the monies that float around in the taxi ranks. These are the monies that are used to pay these hitmen eventually. So we're saying if we move into formal businesses as opposed to just taxi associations, and coupled with that, if we move to cashless payment systems so that there is no cash that is unaccounted for, that is floating around at the taxi ranks, then that will be a step in the right direction, and it will assist us as we deal with the issue of violence in the industry.
Yeah. How's that looking? Is that possible within the next 4, 5, 10 years?
It's absolutely possible. In fact, there are associations across the country that are already busy with pilot projects in terms of cashless payment systems. And there are also associations that have already established trading companies.
Yeah.
So yes, it's possible in the next 3 to 4 years.
Yeah, we certainly hope so, because ultimately everything from the violence right through to the tensions to the concerns that motorists and all those passengers that are within the taxi are certainly concerned about need to be alleviated soon. Mandla, appreciate your time this morning. Thank you so much. Let's have this frank conversation again very soon. Mandla Hermanus is the Santaco Western Cape chairperson there, joining us as we talk about the 4 people gunned down at the Cape Flats taxi rank then in the early hours of today. 3 others were also wounded. Police now issuing a 100,000 Rand reward to anybody who can come forward with information.